My name is Danielle. I'm a behavior analyst and director of behavior support for Eastern Seals of Southeastern Pennsylvania. This is our second official Easter Seals webinar, so thank you guys for joining us. I want to introduce who we have on with us. We have Adrienne, if you want to give a little wave.
Hi.
Our OT from our Montgomery County division. She is going to help present kind of like the first half of material in our sleep strategies webinar today. And we also have Niquetta. She is our behavior specialist, our community behavior specialist out of Philadelphia division. She is going to help with moderating today. So I'm going to go to the ground rules slide. I did show this as you guys were coming in. I just want to review it. This is a Zoom webinar, so our attendees don't have audio or video capabilities. Please type questions in the Q&A. There are going to be 3 opportunities throughout the webinar when Niquetta will give us some questions to answer. So type them in the Q&A as they come in your head, and hopefully we'll have time to answer a bunch of your questions. We can also send resources and links through the Q&A or chat if we need to as well. Along those lines, I will follow up with whoever registers for the webinar. I will follow up with an email with the PowerPoint as well as any additional resources that we share or talk about today. Okay? Another note that if you do type a question in the Q&A, your name will appear, but you can select anonymous so that that does not appear in the Q&A. And just please try not to use any identifying information about your child. And this is a safe space, guys. No judgment. There are no silly questions. So please ask away. This is here just to help. Okay, so we're going to get started. All right, so I'm just going to give a little intro about why are we talking about this. Okay, because we all need sleep, especially now. I feel like being home now, just to give you guys a little reference, I do have 2 younger children. I have a 6-year-old and I have a 9-month-old. So my sleep hasn't been that great. I feel like I do this presentation and I'm like, I analyze, am I getting good sleep right now? Some nights are better than others. And I'm going to share my experiences with you guys, with both of my children throughout this webinar as well. So why do we need good sleep? Okay, so parents as well and family members as well as kids need good sleep. And why? So the research shows us that without good sleep, okay, parents and families can be negatively impacted by poor daytime functioning, right? You might feel like in a daze or hazy throughout your day. It also has been linked to maternal depression, okay, and marital discord. And I don't think those things are disconnected. I think they're really interrelated, right? If your daytime functioning is off, maybe you're going to be arguing with your husband more, right? Or maybe if the kids are in your bed, that might cause some marital discord, right? And, you know, our mental health can be affected by our sleep as well, right? So it is really important for us too, as well as the kids. So our kids, what does the research say? The research says that kids without good sleep can be negatively impacted by unintentional injuries, difficult temperaments, so talking about challenging behavior might be occurring because they're tired throughout the day, obesity, poor academic performance. As kids get older, their academics can be affected. And again, along with temperament, challenging behavior, problem behavior like noncompliance, aggression, and even self-injury can be affected by kiddos' lack of sleep. So when we talk about good sleep, just to put this in reference for what Adrienne's gonna talk about, think about what does that mean? So good sleep means falling asleep quickly, staying asleep through the night, getting the appropriate amount of sleep, waking up in the morning without too much trouble, and also not feeling drowsy throughout the day. So think about those things as Adrienne's talking, and we're going to come back, and I'm going to jump in with some behavioral strategies after Adrienne talks about the sensory components, and really think about which one of these criteria for good sleep that you want to work on, or you think that your child needs help with. Okay, Adrian's going to jump in with some sensory processing.
So hello. So you may have heard of the terminology sensory processing. We all know that we were all taught in school. There are 5 different sensory inputs: hearing, touch, taste, smell. But it's basically taking what's coming in the world, in the environment around us, processing that information, and then being able to respond to the environment or to other people. Could change it. So there are actually more than the 5 that we are taught in school. Therapists use 2 of these sensory inputs the most when we talk about self-regulation. And these are big words called proprioception, which means body awareness, or just knowing where your body is in a space. If you ever kind of saw this test, you keep your eyes closed, you touch your nose, you know where your nose is with your eyes closed. So that's basically having really good a body awareness. It's kind of taking that visual piece out of it and still knowing where you are. And then that vestibular piece, which is movement, and that's, just being able to rock a baby. You go rhythmically and predictably, and the baby will fall asleep. So just using those 2 inputs a lot in therapy to help children self-regulate, as we call it. And then there's also other ones. There's actually like 10 or more. There's pain, there's temperatures, there's all other different sensory inputs. But the most important ones are the proprioception and the vestibular, which is what we focus on for self-regulation. Change it. Excuse me. So self-regulation, what does that mean? So it's just taking one's energy level, energy levels, emotions, behaviors, attention, taking all of that, again, processing, and then being able to act appropriate and socially acceptable. So what's the benefit in this? So if you're regulated, it helps you feel control of your body, of your impulses. You're not just, jumping around. You see something, you feel the impulse to touch it. You'll be able to regulate yourself to say, no, maybe I should wait, see if that's a good thing to touch, or so on and so forth. It helps children feel successful and have positive interactions with others. If you think about, if you're feeling real crummy one day and you meet somebody even for the first time, you may not always have the best interaction on that first discussion, or the interaction might not be good. So just because you're feeling crummy, you're sleepy, whatever the reason is that you're not feeling good that day. And obviously that would affect your self-esteem. So if you are talking to somebody and you're feeling crummy and they're thinking, oh, what's wrong with this person? You're not going to feel good about yourself because maybe people aren't talking to you or whatever. So regulation really is an important skill that children need, and people in general need to learn, especially in the educational setting. Change that. So a child's nervous system, they learn to regulate their response to the environment in order to fall asleep. So there's probably a slew of strategies that you guys may have heard of, that you've tried yourself. I have tried many on myself with my family. I have been blessed with a child that sleeps well for some reason, but he is very active. So there are a lot of strategies I did put in place myself, putting in routines, as we all do, the bedroom, take a bath, maybe read a book, whatever that, whatever your routine is. Danielle, do you have certain strategies that you use to help your children sleep?
So my son, who's now 6, he still isn't a great sleeper. I'll share later some of the things that we worked on, but we tried everything with him. We tried different sorts of lights in the room. We tried diffusers with different sounds. Adrian's going to talk about some of these things. We tried changing up bedtimes earlier and later, literally everything. I will say that there are some strategies that have worked and some that haven't. Some he still uses. So I feel like a lot of times it's just like trial and error. Like you're like, what's gonna work? What's not gonna work? With my little one now, she's a little bit better of a sleeper, but I think I've learned from my son some of the strategies that worked for him and using them with her. So some consistent lighting in the room is one thing that's helped. My son has it's like a nightlight, but it's like the stars that shine on the sky on the ceiling, and it's just one static color. We'll talk later about like movement and how that can affect kiddos waking up at night. So he still has that. So he has that from when he was little, and he still uses it now that he's 6. Having a good routine. I know Adrian was going to talk a little bit about that, and embedding a lot of these strategies in his routine. One thing that he really loves is yoga. So we try to do some yoga before bed, and it's not every night anymore. Like as kids get older, you want to fade out some of these strategies, but he'll ask for it certain nights. So that's a good way that I think he sometimes now regulates himself, right? Like I've prompted him to do all this stuff over the years, and now if he needs it, he'll say, like, can we do yoga? Can we do some stretching? He'll ask me for it. So there are just some of the strategies that we've used at our house.
And that's fantastic, because that's exactly what we strive for, is to get our kids to ultimately be able to figure out how they feel so they can pick a strategy that works for them. So that's really great that your son figured that out. One I just thought of too is that my son also recently, a lot lately, likes to be tucked in with his stuffed animals. So I have to put them and arrange them all over his body so he can get snugly and settles them down and goes to sleep. So that's a big one in our house right now.
Real quick, if you don't mind, going back to I'm going to go back to your first slide, the sensory stuff, because I feel like as someone that's not, especially coming into the field and not knowing a lot about this, sensory processing pieces can be really confusing. So for parents or family members on here that haven't heard of sensory processing before or know a lot about it, Adrian gave a good description about like all the different senses, right? We know we all have those senses, right? But I think what we need to think about is how everybody's body interprets and regulates those senses are different and can be different, right? Like my son, he doesn't have typical development, but he has really sensitive hearing. We just did a potty training webinar yesterday, and I was talking about in public bathrooms, I still have to cover his ears when the hand dryers come on because he's just really sensitive to sound. So I think it's important to note that every kiddo might have some differences in the way that their body kind of interprets and regulates the senses. Is that accurate, Adrian?
That's absolutely right. If I were just to talk about my own son as well, my son, he doesn't have so much sensitivity in sound. My son does not stop moving. He's constantly bouncing. He's constantly moving. So he seeks different input. But it could be anything. Like Danielle talked about sound. It could be an over sensitivity to light that might be not help your child regulate much, or other things. But it doesn't just have to be some of the obvious movement, things like that. And yes, every child is absolutely different.
And especially for me, sorry, I'm going to go back to where you were at, but when working with children with autism, a lot of the times, those kiddos do have some difficulty with knowing where they're at, that proprioception, right? So I always think about this when someone described it to me, like sitting in a chair, right? Like when you sit in a chair, you feel your tush in the chair, right? You can feel the armrest. Like if I lean back, I feel the seat, right? For some kiddos that might lack some of that body awareness, they might not be able to feel where they're at sitting in the chair, right? Some kids like slouch down in their chair and like jello, right? And that might be that they have some difficulty with that proprioception. So what we're trying to do is now link that to self-regulation, how it affects their sleep, because it really, really can do that. It really can, and knowing those differences can help you when trying to determine strategies to use for the kiddos.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Niquetta, are there any questions at this point for Adrian in the Q&A? Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, there is a question. My son is good to go at bedtime, but in the middle of the night, he wakes up and it's hard for him to recover his sleep. Any suggestions or strategies?
That is a very good question, a very loaded question. So yes, I know it's awesome. I'm glad you were able to get your kiddo to sleep. Awesome. So it is difficult to get them back to sleep once they're raring to go. I am going to go into some strategies in a few minutes. If I might be able to answer some of your question in a few minutes, and then if there's still more questions that you have or strategies, please ask again in the Q&A, because I'm definitely going to address all this, and I'll be a little more specific. It'll probably look better with the visual.
And same here too. I'm gonna at the end, when we go over the behavioral strategies, we're gonna talk specifically about what to do or how to prevent some of those mid nighttime wake ups.
Yes.
Anything else? Any other questions, Niquetta? Okay, great. We're gonna go on to some of those strategies.
Okay. So like Danielle and I had mentioned previously, we are trying to really tap into those two sensory inputs that we talked about, the proprioception, the body awareness, knowing where you are in space, and then the movement piece, you know, being able to use that as a regulation to help with children to settle down. So some of the strategies that we're always using is that heavy work, trying to get our bodies to work against that resistance, to tire ourselves out. But that does look different for every child, like we've been saying. Some really great regulating activities, and this is the highest amount, because I know there are some kiddos out there that need a lot of input to really get regulated, and some of that is going upside down or spinning around. So there's a lot of input that comes into that. I do say that to be careful when you're doing things like that, because when you're giving such intense input, you can have a child feel real dizzy, nauseous, maybe started sweating. So you always want to keep an eye on a child when you're doing things like that. A lot of times, if we do find that kids are sensitive to movement, as a therapist, we would do it incrementally in little steps to get them to feel their bodies to regulate slowly and to get them to understand that they're safe. So, but that is really, really great. You need some intense input, any kind of activity going upside down and spinning. There are also, as I listed, crashing is a great, very simple activity. You can pretty much do that on any I guess really anywhere if it works. Crashing is fun, it's novel, the kids are always giggling. And it's just simply taking them and crashing them on a pillow, maybe taking another pillow, blanket, and just crashing it or wrapping them up, just giving them that body awareness. So you also think when, how do I know when I'm feeling better? A great example is, if you are a kind of person that runs because you have anxiety for whatever the reason, you're working and you're running, and for you, that's heavy work. And maybe afterwards you feel better. All of a sudden, maybe some of that anxiety, you're relaxed, you're more focused. So that's kind of what we're talking about, tapping into that sense to calm us, and just doing that in a way that kids find that are fun and novel. Again, Danielle mentioned earlier, yoga. There is a great, and I know Danielle has mentioned this before, called Cosmic Kids, right? Cosmic Kids. And there's all kind of yoga stuff out there on YouTube, free, that you could do, learn some simple ones, and maybe you could do that before bed, forming some of those activities. Snow angels is simple. They're something kids, they provide a lot of body awareness. You could lay down on the ground and play games, pretend that it's snowing, do some snow angels. It's just the idea that we're giving them that awareness of their body to help them calm. Again, at night, it may really look different for everybody. Also mentioned animal walks, bear and crab, you're going upside down, you're inverting. There's a slew of stuff on the internet about what animal walks are. Some of you already know what they are. And even just simply pushing heavy objects, pushing or pulling, carrying heavy objects, just providing the body some resistance like that they have to fight against. You can push furniture around the house. You could have weighted balls. Five Below sells them for only $5. There's like, I think 5 and 8 pounds. Big, even if you have heavy old books, stick them in a backpack. We have a heavy backpack. Stick books in a laundry basket. Push it around. You could even make a game out of it. You know, oh, look, let's go find the red book. And you can push that laundry basket around, take the red book, put it in the laundry basket. So now you pushed it into a functional game, and you're also working on your child trying to self-regulate. Also just mentioning deep pressure, and in general, kids all love it. Squeezes, we often give them good squeezes and hugs. They often ask for that. That's all considered deep pressure. A lot of times our kids love when we just squeeze their heads. They just need that, or squeeze their face. They need that to their body. It helps them calm. That's why they're requesting it, because they want to calm themselves and it feels good. Even vibration. You get some of these little massagers. Some kids love that. Some kids don't. But some it works. Sometimes even a vibrating toothbrush can help with getting some oral motor awareness. So this all just provides that deep pressure, so the body awareness, which helps then inadvertently calm. And then also, mentioned it before, it doesn't always have to mean that you need movement activities and heavy work activities. Our children have all different needs. Sometimes a simple, you know, if we have a box, a sensory box that has dry rice or dry macaroni, sometimes just playing with that, the visual of it falling, just the feel of it, things like that, for whatever the child likes with that activity, that could be a simple 5-minute activity before bed, to play, to work on calming. And then the other one I do just mention first is visual bottles. Visual bottles can be very simple to make at home. You can use anything. I like to use the Vox water bottles because they're like a real straight cylinder. And you can put water and it's oil. Again, you can look up the recipe, contact me. I can get it to you if you need it. But you just basically put water and oil, and you could put glitter and little beads, whatever you want. I made a minion once with yellow, little yellow rubber bands, and we just used to, you can flip it upside down. Visual can be very calming for some kids, and again, I'm talking to children, all different needs. Sometimes that piece is better than others. And then the other really big piece I would like you to always to take into account, but the very first thing you consider is the environment. Sometimes we don't always think about that. I sometimes like to have things just in a spot. I don't like clutter. Kind of just distracts me a lot and it helps me focus, which is kind of funny because if I have work to do, a lot of times, like if I was in school and I used to study, I used to literally straighten my house up before I did my homework because I just needed that peace of mind to focus. But just thinking about the environment, if it's very cluttered, it can be obviously very distracting. If it's a little more neat and tidy, there's not as many things for children to look at, to get distracted by. It helps to focus your attention. And it's the same thing when we're in the classroom. If you have a child that's in the classroom and the teacher says, hey, Johnny isn't focusing, and maybe we found out Johnny really likes the alphabet. Well, then we find out that the entire classroom is filled with the alphabet. Well, I wouldn't pay attention either. So you want to think about just decreasing some of that to decrease distraction. And some may be a little more obvious than others, but it's definitely a really important piece to consider. Go to the next one. Thank you. So for some more strategies, again, obvious, like I was talking about the environment, low lighting, Danielle talked about that also. And then having predictable movement associated with that lighting. So if you think about it, if you had a light, I guess if you were ever at a dance club and you saw a light going all over the place, that's supposed to be very alerting, supposed to keep you up and keep you in a certain state. You want to obviously have things subdued and low when you're in an environment where you want to sleep, which is very obvious. But you also want that stuff predictable. So you have something going crazy, it's going to catch your attention and it's maybe going to prevent you from falling asleep as quickly. But if something is real rhythmical, it's going around and around, just real smooth, it eventually becomes very soothing, hopefully, and lulling to the child, and it can help them fall asleep. I know recently a colleague was telling me we learned about the lighting specifically in a training, and a colleague even told me that she tried this as she was having difficulty sleeping, and she put in a red light. You can buy a red light at probably any Walmart, Lowe's, and they just changed the lighting, and it actually really helped enhance her sleep. And she fell asleep quickly, and she fell asleep throughout the night. So maybe that waking up, I mean, she used to wake up in the middle of the night, that red light was still lulling enough that she was able to go back to sleep. And just also mentioning light, you know, we're always talking about too much screen time, which is kind of funny in this capacity right now. Reduce the screen time. But it's, again, it's an important thing to still make sure that we're addressing because the light from a screen, from the computer, from a TV, tablet, phone, it mimics a blue light, which mimics the light outside. So your brain is not thinking it's time to go to sleep because you are being constantly bombarded by all of this blue light, and your brain just constantly thinks it's supposed to be up. So taking a break from that TV, obviously we know that's important, but this is one of the reasons why it's important, because that light is confusing your brain. And then again, maybe trying some of that red or orange light to help mimic that it's dark out instead of that brighter or intense light, you know, that you would get during the day. Also, yes, maybe some of these are very obvious too. Smells, we all hear about how lavender helps calm, vanilla I've heard also. So you can always, you know, have that going in the room if that may help. Sound machine, you'll hear about white noise. So again, talking about that predictable, rhythmical sound that we're constantly hearing. So it's not always changing, so your brain doesn't always have to click on to follow it. It just becomes very lulling. So a lot of those can help with sleep. So with that said, recently one of my mom colleagues has told me about this article about white noise, like I just mentioned, about how it can affect development, which I thought this is really interesting, and I just recently learned about this. So just to go over it real quick, a study in 1990 found that white noise can be beneficial in helping infants go to sleep, and that they were able to fall back to sleep quicker. And that it obviously blocked out environmental noise, and it could be comforting. Sometimes, I know I had it with my son, we had the sound of a heartbeat in the beginning, that's considered white noise and lulling. But one of the issues that we're going to talk about also is that once that input, the white noise stops, that can help wake your child up, because now they become a little bit dependent on that sound. They're constantly hearing it, and now it stops, and now it's like, oh, what stopped? So now if you're in a situation like maybe you went to visit grandmom or you went on vacation, you forgot the white noise machine. It just obviously can make situations like that difficult because the child really needs that to sleep. And then they also found that white noise, the noise that you're hearing all the time, actually exceeded the limit of noise that a child should fall asleep to, which I thought was really interesting. So it also caused, dependency to fall asleep. So they needed those to fall asleep. If they didn't have it, they really had difficulty falling asleep. And not as we always know, not all babies respond to white noise, which we always know all children are different. So using this, I just want to make this connection really quick again. The white noise is used for self-regulation, and we're using an outside device to work on the self-regulation. So also in 2014, another study, so this is from the Academy of the American American Academy of Pediatrics, I got it, AAP, they tested white noise machines, and they found that, again, that's what it exceeded the 50 decibel noise limit a baby should hear. So it was too loud. So we had the noise machines on too long, and they were too loud for our babies. And then they were finding that it could affect some of our kiddos' hearing, because they're constantly hearing. It never goes off. There's always something. And they were finding that it could risk speech and language development, which I thought was really fascinating. So one of the things they said, so don't panic if you did that with your baby, but it just says that the AAP recommends that if you just set the noise machine 7 feet away from where your child is sleeping, then and you don't also put it up to the maximum setting, that it's okay to use at that level. We just want to make sure, again, it's not too loud, which was it seemed to be the worst piece of it. If it was too loud, then it was really affecting the babies, their hearing capabilities. And then again, as we keep reiterating, so every child is different. So when you're introducing new strategies, do it safely, and just looking for some negative reactions like we talked about before. It's not really going to happen probably so much with noise. I mean, obviously, if a child's going like this, holding their ears, crying, that's a negative reaction. But you know, there's other reactions when you're, like I mentioned before, that if you give them too much input, now you may have a child that's lethargic, they're not feeling well, whatever. So you just always want to make sure that you safely integrate some of these things. And then another really great sleep strategy is even trying a multisensory approach. So what do I mean by that? Just trying different sensory inputs. So think about if you're taking a bath. For your moms out there, you're taking a bath. Maybe you're kind of lady that likes some music on, some candles, maybe even have some lavender in the bath. You're using a multisensory approach to calming, and that works for you. So you're using smell, you're using the body awareness of the water, the temperature of the water, the quietness and the lulling light, maybe the slow music. So you get the idea of what that means, and we just have to figure out how that means for your kiddo. And then even if you talk about your child, so now we're talking about how do we get the 4-year-old to settle down before bed. Well, maybe for your kiddo, you need to have a pillow fight for 5 or 10 minutes. And that can be pretty strenuous after a while, especially for a 4-year-old. So maybe after that play, and sometimes you only need 5 minutes. Sometimes 5 minutes sounds long, but 5 minutes and all of a sudden they're tired. You know, so you think about, you're crashing them, you're tickling them, you're hitting them with pillows. They're picking pillows up 100 times. They're smacking you with it. Even hitting you with it is giving them that proprioception input. Maybe you slam them on the bed, you know, just thinking about roughhousing. Now it's 5 minutes later and your kiddo's wiped. All that energy just left. It's a great time to maybe jump in the bed, and maybe if you can get there, read a nice story or whatever the little thing, bonding maybe moment, you know, you can lay with your child, whatever it is. Now you may have them at that moment, and then you can probably really work on trying to get them to sleep, sing again a song, you know, again, a story, whatever would work. I just also mentioned a few, maybe not always things that can be worked right before bed, but just playing stop and go flashlight tag or game race would be helpful, because when you play a stop and go game, it's really working on self-regulation, because you have to go, stop. And then you have to be able to tune all that in to stop. If you're not regulated, you're still going to be going. So it's such a good skill to work on in general, obviously, especially for some of our kids that like to elope. But, you know, just playing that is actually very regulatory. And I just want to make one other mention, is that you want to match your child's energy level and to help them with calming. So what you want to do is you want to just make sure that when you do give them the input, you want to really give them a lot of heavy work. If you give them too much movement, you'll see that your child may not be regulated. So you may see, oh, you know, like my kiddo, it never stops moving. But if I kept him moving and jumping and did some kind of jumping activity, I guarantee you that he will not settle down still for a little while. what I need to do is, well, you know, again, maybe do a pillow fight or get cushions off the couch and do some kind of obstacle course. So you're adding that heavy work into that movement piece to really bring him down and settle them down. And then again, whatever strategy you use, you really should have it throughout the whole night. Like I mentioned with the white noise, if it stops, you're really running a risk of a child waking up. So if you have music or something, and sometimes too, and I know I just clicked in my head, this has been happening, I realized in my house, is I would a lot of times going downstairs trying to be quiet, but eventually, you know, you get loud, and I'm sure my son hears us upstairs when he's sleeping. Well, there's been a few times where he came down because he couldn't hear us. So it actually was more regulatory for him to hear the sounds downstairs because he knew mom and dad were downstairs. So again, it just looks so different. It can mean so many different things. You know, always talk to, if you have the ability, talk to your therapist or your team, and we could help you try to work on strategies that could help relate, and maybe some of these might help. Oh, I forgot about that. Yes, so I did want to bring up also just one other thing, which is really important that we find in sleep, is sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is when your sleep is interrupted. There's two types, central apnea and obstructive apnea. So a lot of those sleep apnea symptoms you may see with your kiddos, or maybe people in general, snoring, they stop breathing, they're all over their sleep, sweating, they're so sleepy during the day, you know, they sleep in really weird positions. If you're seeing this day to day, this might be a cause for concern. And you could probably flip over to the next slide there, Danielle. So it would be really important to talk to your doctor, just saying that there could be an issue with this, and making sure that there is no medical reason for your child to be waking up. I know sometimes, again, not a doctor, but sometimes I know tonsils or other throat things may affect our kiddos, even allergies. I know that happens in our house. So just sometimes there could be a medical issue. So I would definitely talk to your doctors and make sure that that, again, is not affecting your child. So yes, I was just wondering if there was any questions, and with me blabbing on, I thought it would be a good time to work on your own regulation, and you could either stretch just to help, you know, wake yourself up, or take a deep breath, you know, whatever amount of energy you have. Hopefully this is helping, and if you have any questions.
Great, thanks, Adrienne. So take a minute, stretch, roll your shoulders, roll your neck. I know me sitting at the computer all day, I have to remind myself like to do that, or I do get really like tense. So just take a minute, stretch a little bit. If you need to stand up, we can't see you, so that's the good thing. You can do whatever you want, right? Does anyone are there any more questions in the Q&A, Nikita, for Adrienne?
No, that's it. No.
Okay, so I wanted to say too that some other strategies that I've used with my son that have worked, you know, and it's really hard. This is like a hard topic to talk about, the sensory piece. And like I said before, it is really trial and error. But I also use a lot of the squeezing with him. Like we actually, I shared this at the last training we had in person, and we did, like, he called them squeezies. Like I said, well, it's like, I'm gonna just try it, right? Because he was really, like Adrienne said about her son, very active around bedtime, and we tried to use some deep pressure to like help calm him down. And I would just, he'd lay in bed, and I would just like squeeze his arms and put a little pressure on his belly and his legs, and he loved it. He is still one of the things he asks for once in a while now, but every night we would do 5 squeezies. So, you know, matching his energy, like Adrienne said before, something that we would do like before bedtime. So if he's like running around really hyper, maybe do something like Simon Says, match his energy, you know, go through our routine, give some like squeezies before bed. And we found that those things really did help. So like Adrienne said, if you do work with a team, and you're struggling with this piece of bedtime, talk to them about it, because sleep strategies are really, they're interconnected, right? I'm going to go over some behavioral stuff, but the sensory piece, the regulation piece is definitely interconnected, right? So if you're trying just strictly a behavioral approach, they might need some calming strategies to help regulation on the forefront. And that's what we did. So I'm going to move on. I'm going to talk a little bit about
Can I interrupt? I'm sorry,
Sure.
Danielle. You just brought up another really good point, and I wanted to just make sure that this is also understood, and I apologize. One, you just made me think again, talking about my own personal situation with my son. Again, my son is neurotypical, but very active little boy. And he does this thing, and he actually has always done it since an infant. And I realized this, I was in mom mode, and it took me a while for the OT brain to sink back in. Every night what he would do, so a lot of times our kids, what are they doing? They're jumping, they're bouncing, it's time to go to bed, and they're not settled down. So a lot of times what I noticed is my son was doing this thing where he would stick his head into his pillow, which was up against the wall, and he would run his body really quick. His feet and legs are sliding on the sheet. His arms are going really fast. And literally he did some kind of this since he was an infant. And I would be like, lay down, sit still. What are you doing? It's time for bed. All the things that we usually say. And then I realized, oh my gosh, my kid is trying to self-regulate. Like the OT brain finally sunk in. And as soon as I just stepped back and I gave him the time to do that, it literally took a few minutes. Again, it was like 5 minutes, even though 5 minutes sometimes feels long. I gave him those few minutes to do that, and he would settle down, and it kind of went down from there, where we were able to get a book in, and, we sang songs or whatever. So again, I just wanted to just make that point that matching their energy is not always, you're not always going to match them where they're all calm. I allowed my son to do that energy thing where he just was getting it out, and then eventually he tired himself out. So that's the kind of thing that we want them to do. So even, maybe your kiddo's been doing something like that too, and you didn't even realize it, but just wanted to give you that example. Sorry.
I love that, Adrian, because I think it's important too that we observe our kids, right? And we can then find appropriate ways to meet their sensory needs, right? Because they are telling us what they need, right? So sometimes we have to just channel that into some of and by using some of these strategies, right? Because what they're doing, sometimes it comes out, sometimes it's challenging behavior, right? It comes out like non-compliance, like, oh, I'm telling you to get in bed, but you're running in circles, or you're bumping your head into the bed, right? To parents, it might seem like, oh, my kid's not listening, right? Mm-hmm. But it really might be they are self-regulating. Mm-hmm. So you can take some strategies and kind of funnel that energy, match them where they're at with some appropriate activities, So I think that was a really good point.
And also, just to let everyone know that I did add some activities. There's some handouts that give you more activities that you can do at home.
Yeah. So when I'll send out the email tonight with the PowerPoint and some additional heavy work activities that Adrian wanted to share with you guys.
And please contact me if you need some ideas, because I will be happy to try to problem solve and figure out some things. So.
Yeah, and all of our contact information, once you get the PowerPoint, is in the PowerPoint as well.
So ladies, we have one more question. Is it typical for a child on the spectrum to wake up at 3 a.m. although he's been asleep anywhere between 7 and 8 hours?
I mean, yeah, kiddo, it could be that self-regulation piece. I mean, there are so many kiddos on the spectrum that really have difficulty sleeping. It's a really hard thing. Because like you said, even if they were regulated maybe up to 3 o'clock in the morning and something distracted them to wake them up, we don't know. But I would say it's typical for your ASD kid to do that. And then maybe that's where you need to figure out, maybe problem solve, what is the reason? I believe Danielle is going to get in a couple more strategies about that, which probably will answer the question. And we can maybe talk about it again. So I don't mean to keep pushing it off at the end, because I know she does have a couple things that might answer that question as well.
So we're going to talk about those nighttime wake-ups, and we're going to talk about developmentally appropriate amounts of sleep. I'll just say real quick, if he's already sleeping 8 hours prior to 3 a.m., he might not be tired anymore, right? So we might have to, and this is so, and I'm going to talk about it later, it's hard for parents to back up bedtime later. It's just, I get it. I want my kid in bed so I can have some me time. Everybody deserves that, right? But if we're expecting our kiddos to be in bed an amount of time that's not developmentally appropriate, you're going to get these early wake-ups. So that might be what is happening. But I would say regulation could be a piece of it as well. And we're going to go through some of my strategies, and hopefully that we'll hit on some pieces that might help as well. Okay, thanks, Nikita. Thanks, Adrian. We're going to move on a little bit, and we're going to kind of piggyback on the good sleeping goals that we talked about earlier. Okay, so let's think about how we define a good sleep, and now what do we want to work on. Okay, so, and this can be for you too. I keep saying to like my child, but we also need to get good sleep as well. So think about, what would your good sleep goal be? I know a lot of you are saying sleeping through the night, eliminating those, mid of the night wake ups, maybe independently. Maybe you want your child to fall asleep more quickly. We really want kids to be able to fall asleep within 5 to 15 minutes of putting them to bed. Like once they're actually down. So, and that is something that we did work on with my son. We would be in bed sometimes for hours, right? Trying to work on this. So I'll talk to you about my experiences with that. And then we want our kiddos to get a developmentally appropriate amount of sleep. So we're going to start there. A few assumptions of behavior analysis. The rest of what I'm going to talk about is taking a more behavioral approach. We look at falling asleep as a skill, as a behavior. We look at sleep difficulties or problems as skill deficits, and we can address sleeping difficulties by understanding the controlling variables, right, our environment, looking at the environment, what's happening right before bedtime, right around bedtime, and those events associated with bedtime. And then we look at teaching the appropriate skills to fall asleep. So goal 1, we want to look at how can we help kids get a developmentally appropriate amount of sleep at night. So if this is your goal, maybe you're seeing that your child has a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, or complying with those nighttime routines. And that can occur sometimes if they are expected to be in bed too long. Okay? Difficulty waking up or daytime tiredness can be related to kids being in bed too short of a period of time, which is what we also ran into with my son. He does not want to get up in the morning because he was tired. He was fighting me to go to sleep, right? He was going to sleep too late, and then he was super tired, and we woke up in the morning with a challenging behavior, which is not how anybody wants to wake up in their morning, right? Trying to fight with your kid to get out of bed. So the solution, okay, for one piece of this is scheduling a developmentally appropriate amount of sleep. So what is that? So here are the current, I'm sorry, this is a little fuzzy. When I send you the resources, I'll also send the actual infographic. But they change these recommendations every so often. This is the most recent one. Okay, so sleep duration recommendations. So if you look at the graphic, if we're looking at preschool age, 3 to 5 years old, you want the recommended hours is 10 to 13 hours. Now that includes nap times. So if your child is still napping, you want to add how long they're sleeping at night plus how long their naps are. Okay, so the might be appropriate hours, right, are those light blue. So it could be as low as 8 to 9 hours or as high as 14. Okay, so there's a pretty wide gap there because every body is different and some kids might need more or less. But in general, when you're thinking about scheduling bedtimes and total amount of sleep, think about 8 as your minimum, 14 as your maximum if we're looking at that 3 to 5 age range, okay? And then it drops as the kiddo gets older, okay? It's always funny. I always look at me, and I'm like, 6 is the minimum. So, hey, all of us, including me, getting less than 6 hours of sleep, not good, right? 6 should be our minimum. And then the max, I wish. Some of you that are getting 10 hours of sleep, I'm jealous of, okay? So 6 is your minimum, all right? So think about your child, think about yourself, and are you hitting these numbers? Okay, if you're not hitting these numbers, then you need to look at the times that you're expecting your child to go to bed and wake up in the morning. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later too, but these times need to be flexible. They need to be flexible, especially like, I don't know, when you're home during a pandemic and you can sleep as late as you want, right? If your kid is sleeping in later, right? Let's say like my son, he's not getting up now until like, I don't know, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Whereas before for school, he was going to get up at 7, 7:30, right? So as their wake up times get later, bedtime should get later too. And I know it's hard to hear, right? It's hard to hear as a parent, right? We don't want to move back bedtime, but they're going to be fighting you, possibly, unless you're one of those kids that can just sleep no matter what, which is like teenagers, right? But for our young kids, if we try to stick with that same 8 o'clock bedtime, even if they got up an hour later, you might have a struggle, okay? So be flexible with these times, right? And adjust your bedtimes. Also, for our kids that are phasing out naps, right? That nap time, some days that you have it, some days you don't. That's gonna affect bedtime, okay? So if they're skipping their nap that day, they'll probably go to bed a little bit earlier, right? You can bump up bedtime a little bit. But if they nap, and they typically don't, you gotta bump down bedtime. My son, he still naps sometimes. He fell asleep this morning. Like, he had breakfast and then he fell asleep, right? And I get it, they're home. He's like done school now, so he's like literally nothing to do. So, but tonight, bedtime is gonna be later, right? I'm not gonna try to put him to bed at 8:30 because he slept an extra 2 hours today. So he might not start bedtime routine until 9:30, okay? So be flexible with your times. It'll be easier to get them to go to sleep if you can adjust their bedtimes depending on how much time they're sleeping during the day and what time they're waking up in the morning, okay? All right, goal 2, moving on. We want kiddos to fall asleep within 5 to 15 minutes of putting them to bed. Okay, we're gonna talk about the forbidden zone. Now, some of this stuff like blew my mind when I first learned about it. But if we put kids to bed too early, okay, it will increase the likelihood of delayed sleep onset, which means they don't fall asleep. Sleep interfering behavior, which means they have behavior and they don't want to sleep. They're running around, they're saying no, they're being defiant, or just being generally non-compliant, okay? So before I go to the solution, I want to talk to you about what is this forbidden zone, what does it mean, and how can it impact bedtime. So here's a chart. This is the line that you see is alertness, right? So the yellow says alert. There, your alert times during the day. And the bottom where it says sleepy, where you're more sleepy. This is just a typical chart of alertness, okay? So you see when you get up, okay? So nighttime, you wake up, if you can see my mouse, is that first hump. Okay, the first hump is when you wake up, okay? So you wake up, you're pretty alert, right? And then you see where the arrow is pointing, your midday dip in alertness. So that is like when you eat lunch and you get tired, right? You're like, oh, I need a nap. It might be where some kids actually nap, right? That dip in alertness, you're a little more sleepy. And then look what happens, okay? Look what happens. Right before bedtime is the forbidden zone. this is the kiddos and adults too, our peak alertness. We may even be more alert than when we first wake up in the morning, okay, is right before we go to sleep. So if you try to put your kiddo to bed during that forbidden zone, what do you think's going to happen? They're going to fight you tooth and nail. Okay, that's what my son did. I was putting him to bed too early, and it was really stressful for me and my husband. It was like hours, sometimes 2 hours of trying to get him to bed, trying everything we could to get him to sleep. Okay, so now that we know this mind-blowing piece of information, what do we do about it? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the other slide. So one of the solutions is called a faded bedtime. And that's what we had to do. So you take the time they actually fell asleep the night before. So let's say your kiddo didn't fall asleep until 9:45. Okay, the next night you are going to put them in bed later than when they fell asleep, right? You're like, why would I do that? Well, I'm going to tell you why, okay? Because you want them to find a value in sleep. You want them to go to bed tired, okay? So next night, okay, they fell asleep at 9:45. You're going to start your faded bedtime. I'm going to put you to bed at 9:50, okay? They're probably going to fall right asleep, right? And then you gradually move that up earlier, okay? So 9:50, night 1, 9:45, night 2, maybe 9:35, night 3, okay? You move it back. And eventually, you're going to hit the zone. You're going to hit this. That's the only way to identify it. You put them to bed later, and you back up the bedtime, okay? You're going to hit that zone. And then the time that you put them in bed when you hit the zone, let's say it was 8, and the night before when they fell asleep perfectly fine was 8:15, that's your sweet spot, right? 8:15. And every kid, this might be different. And remember what I said before, it also depends on what time they wake up, right? So this whole cycle is dependent on when they first get up, right? Their peak alertness and their most sleepiness. So to identify that forbidden zone, try the faded bedtime. We did that with my son. And we did it over a weekend, obviously, so it was like not as bad. Like the late nights up weren't as bad because it was on the weekends. But we found his sweet spot. We were trying for like 8:15, and his sweet spot is like 8:30, 8:45, right? And it really made, it sounds like it's not a lot of time, but it made a difference because think about when we're starting our routine, right? And we have all these things, like all of the sensory strategies that Adrienne talked about. That's all before 8:15, right? That's not at 8:15 we start that stuff, right? We start all that stuff before, right? So maybe he has a bath, maybe we get pajamas, we brush teeth, we read a book, and then maybe we do some yoga and he gets his squeezies. Like that was all when he was younger. We got all that stuff in. And then after the faded bedtime, all that stuff was done by 8:30. So then we get in bed, we say our prayers, whatever you guys do, you snug, whatever, that was at his bedtime at 8:30. And then he went to sleep, right? Within 5 to 15 minutes, right? So that's one strategy you guys can try. It's called the faded bedtime. Okay? If you have questions, put them in the Q&A, and we'll come back to them at the end. Okay? So, goal 3 is sleeping through the night. Okay, so a lot of you asked about what do I do about these like 3 a.m. wake-ups. So, if you're scheduling an appropriate amount of time for them to go to sleep, right? If you're saying, okay, they're going to get that 10 hours of sleep, 8 to 10, whatever it is, you're not putting to bed in the forbidden zone, you're having a good bedtime and they're still waking up. What could it be? So here's what we're going to talk about. When things that occasion sleep are suddenly removed, okay, or not available, not present, kids can wake up, okay? So Adrienne was saying, it was funny because she was saying how her son, right, is accustomed to hearing them up now, right? Because he goes to bed, but he can hear just like that background noise. And then the night it's not there, he wakes up, right? So when things that occasion sleep, things that we associate with sleep, things we use for sleep, are not there, a kiddo might wake up, okay? And these are our sleep dependencies that we see. TV, electronics, iPads. We're going to talk about a full belly, sometimes eating right before bed or having a bottle for a kiddo right before bed. All of these things, when we go to sleep with them, when they're not there in the middle of the night, they could wake us up. And I'm going to tell you why. Another chart that changed kind of how I thought about sleep. So again, this chart looks funky, but I'm going to describe it to you, okay? So this is a chart of sleep cycle. So, right, so we go from like being awake to going to sleep. We go into REM sleep, light REM sleep, deep non-REM sleep, okay? I have to say this, I'm not by any means a sleep specialist, okay? I am a behavior analyst with some interest in these areas, so I do my best to research them to find out like evidence-based practices for them, right? So don't ask me what deep non-REM sleep is because I don't know. Okay? So, but I do know that we go through these cycles, okay? Everybody does, okay? And when we go to bed at night, okay, our sleep cycles vary. And these yellow dots are what we want to look at, okay? Because we go to sleep, we sleep for a couple hours, and then look what happens. You know, if we go to bed at 8, look what happens at around 10:30. We are almost awake. So we're not actually awake at these points, but we're close. We're close to being awake. So, and we go like this throughout the night, right? We go between deep sleeping to more awake states, and that's how we fluctuate. So, if we go to sleep, right, with something like a TV, and then we get to an awake state, and whatever was there, like that TV, isn't there anymore, we're going to pop up, right? Because our brain's like, oh, what was there before isn't there now, and I'm going to wake up. So it's not necessarily the night waking on its own. It's the reinitiating, like that, getting back to sleep, right? But we're doing it subconsciously, okay? So going back to my other slide, okay, we have to think about our sleep dependencies. And I'm going to give you an example from me because it was the television. And it still is. And I'm going to tell you how we remedied that. So when I got married, and I told my husband that I sleep with the TV on, he was not happy about it. He's like, I cannot sleep with the TV on. Like, we have to figure something out. So we're like, why don't we just use that sleep timer, right? You know, like the sleep timer on your TV, you can like set it for a certain amount of time, and then it will just go off after I've already fallen asleep. And this is before I knew anything about this. And I was like, oh, sure, sounds great. So set the sleep timer, I go to bed, and I start waking up like multiple times throughout the night. And you know those nights where like waking up like every hour, you're like, come on, like I just want to go to sleep. So I would wake up, TV would be off, I'd put the TV back on, set the sleep timer again, and I'd go back to sleep. I'd wake up again. I'm like, what the heck? Right? Like, what is going on? So I was getting to these alert states, and the TV was off, and it was popping me up out of my sleep. So we've compromised, by the way, and I don't suggest doing this because I still don't think it's super healthy, but I sleep with like a music channel on, so it actually is like music and a little bit of the light, and that's on consistently for me through the night, and I can stay asleep that way, okay? But think about it. Some of these other things we talk about, kids falling asleep with their iPads, right? They're falling asleep with an iPad, it's going to turn off, right? And then they get to this alert state, iPad's not on, they're going to wake up, right? We'll talk about a full belly. So this is when like, you talk about kids and even like babies, like I have a 9-month-old. I still nurse her to sleep, okay? She wakes up because she doesn't have a full belly. I know that, right? So eventually what I want to do is try to nurse her before her bedtime, right? So she's going to sleep. She's satisfied, but it's not the like super full belly feeling, and she's going to keep waking up, right? And that's why as kids get older, we want to try to eliminate like giving them like large meals or like a full bottle or a full sippy cup of milk right before bed. Because if we do that right before bedtime, I'm talking like right before they go to sleep, they might wake up because their bellies aren't full. You can still do it in your routine, right? I can talk about how I have a whole routine that's like, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes long. You can give him, and my son does it, he gets a snack early on in his routine, right? But by the time he actually gets to sleep, his belly is not like so full that it's going to cause him to wake up in the middle of the night. And some of the stuff I will have to say I still struggle with, because guess what? We as parents occasion sleep, right? We're in there. If we're patting butts, we're singing songs, we're saying prayers, we're snuggling. Are we in there? Are we occasioning sleep, right? So our goal should be to get out of the bedroom before they are actually sleeping, right? That should be every parent's goal. And I know I still with my 6-year-old, I'm in there snuggling and then I sneak out. He does much better. Like I said, he had a really hard time. I will say that when we talk about an environment, as kids get older, really thinking about their bed and what is comfortable goes back to that sensory piece, right? So we moved last summer. He got a big boy bed. It's a full-size bed. We make sure the temperature is good. He sleeps with a fan. I know Adrian talked about the white noise. There's being some like issues with that. And I have to look at my daughter's noise machine now because it's definitely not 7 feet from her bed. But my son likes the fan, like the overhead fan. Is not white noise, but it's another like dull movement, dull sound that does help. So again, all these interconnected pieces. Can we have good sensory strategies? Can we have an appropriate bedtime? And can we make sure that whatever we have stays throughout the night, right? And that will help with some of these night awakenings, right? But again, like I said, if we're still there at bedtime, our kiddos might wake up because when they get to those states, those yellow dots, right, we're not there. So a kiddo might be waking up because we occasionally sleep and we're not there. So we try to fade some of these dependencies, right? And Adrian actually brought this up. Think about if they go to sleep at grandma's house or aunt and uncle's house, right? How would they sleep there? Would you be able to transport or recreate this magical sleep environment that you have at your home, right? If not, then some of those things that you're using might actually be sleep dependencies, okay? But things that are okay, like I said, blankets, pillows. I have to take out the white noise machine now, Adrian. But things that can be on continuously, things that can be transported are okay.
And I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just throwing in, too, I've read recently daycare, which I never even thought about. You can't always recreate that sleep, environment at home at a daycare. Obviously, it just never, but yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, and that would always kill me, too, because my son would have a really hard time going to sleep at home. At a daycare, he slept perfectly fine. They would actually have to wake him up some days because he was sleeping so long at daycare. So again, trying to fade some of those dependencies, and us included. And eventually that's what, if we don't feel like it's developmentally appropriate, like right now I feel like my son's okay. I think it's developmentally appropriate for me to snuggle him, say some prayers, and leave, right? And most nights, he does sleep through the night. Right, once in a while he'll get up and have like a bad dream. That's a whole nother thing we're not going to tackle right now, like night terrors, bad dreams. But as kids get older, and he's getting older, and he's exposed to more, he's having more like weird dreams. It was vampires last night, by the way. But that will wake them up. That's another thing that will wake them up. So all you can do is guide them back to sleep, right? To hopefully sleep through the night then. Okay, so once you get to a point where you're like, I don't feel like it's developmentally appropriate for me to be in here, fade yourself, okay? So maybe you're going to, instead of sitting on the bed, you're going to sit next to the bed, okay? And then they go to sleep. And then you're going to stand at the door. And then you're going to stand at the hallway, right? So fade yourself or any other one of those dependencies out of the picture so that we can get kiddos that are sleeping more independently through the night. Okay, so little encouragement. This is hard stuff, guys. And I know like being at home now throws a whole nother dimension to this, right? But you can do this, okay? You can pick just one thing, right? If you're going to work on the sensory stuff first, try it. All right, I'm going to embed one heavy work activity into my bedtime routine. Try that first, okay? See how it works, right? And then maybe, one weekend you can try the faded bedtime, okay? One thing at a time. Don't overwhelm yourself trying to do too many things at once, because that'll be stressful. And you won't know what's working, right? If you try too many things at one time, you're not going to know what's successful and what's not. So pick one thing, try one thing at a time, okay? So questions. Are there any questions from the Q&A? No? Anyone? Last chance. Speak now or hold your peace.
I just wanted to add something. Oh, I wanted to add something. I just typed it in. You were talking about Joey having a nightmare. I read this somewhere, and I actually tried it myself, and it actually worked. So I don't know if there's evidence, but I know it can help. Is that if you keep a room cold or cooler, it can actually help prevent nightmares and terrors. I found out just, anecdotally for myself, because I noticed that, and I know my son was always hot and sweaty during these times. As soon as I kept the room a little bit on the cooler side, it worked for us. So just saying that, if there is, you might want to try the temperature. Might work.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. We'll definitely have to try it. We actually just put, we don't have central air, but we just put a new air conditioner in the room, so hopefully that helps.
Oh, I hope so.
All right, so thank you guys. I appreciate everyone coming on the call. If there are no questions, that's kind of the end of our presentation. I will send out an email later tonight that will have the PowerPoint as well as other resources. And, there's my reference. A lot of the material was from a presentation from the National Autism Conference. I'm not sure what year it was. It was at least 3 years ago. But there is the reference for that. And Adrian did share some additional resources for sensory strategies, occupational therapy. If you guys want more information on those, maybe Nicoletta, if you haven't filled them in the chat already, fill them in the chat, and we will share them with the PowerPoint presentation later this evening. All right, well, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you guys all for coming on. I know we have some staff on here, so I appreciate you guys taking the time to come on and get some information. I hope it was helpful. I will again send out the, hi Joe. I'm going to send out the information tonight. I'll also send out a little survey for you guys if you have the chance, fill that out. But yeah, thank you everyone. I'm going to stop recording. Have a wonderful night. And is it the weekend yet? No, it's not. Tomorrow's Thursday though. So happy almost weekend. So bye everyone.